October 29th, 2026, 1944. Local time. The Central Red Sea, approximately 112 nautical miles north of the Bab el-Mandeb Strait and 67 nautical miles west of the Yemeni coast near Al-Muqa. The evening sky is moonless and fully dark. New moon phase. No ambient illumination beyond the stars. Visibility restricted to approximately 4 nautical miles at sea level by a light coastal haze drifting in from the Yemeni coast on a 9-knot southwest wind. Air temperature 31 degrees Celsius. Sea state 2. The Red Sea at this hour is as dark as it ever gets, and the darkness is the first element of the operational plan. An Arleigh Burke Flight 3 guided missile destroyer is holding a north-northeast heading at 14 knots, conducting an armed escort assignment for a convoy of 3 commercial tankers, making a northbound transit toward the Suez Canal under Combined Task Force 1-5-3 protection. The destroyer is positioned 1,800 meters ahead of the lead tanker, its SPY-6 radar in active search, its electro-optical and infrared targeting systems scanning the surface and low-altitude air environment in all quadrants. The ship has conducted 14 successful Houthi drone and missile intercepts in the preceding 23 days of Red Sea operations. The crew is experienced, calibrated, and professional. They have not yet encountered 500 drones launched simultaneously. Welcome. I'm your host at Navy Legends. Tonight we are examining the threat category that surface warfare planners have been calling the terminal problem since 2024. Not the single cruise missile that Aegis was designed to engage, not the ballistic re-entry vehicle that SM-6 was upgraded to intercept, but the mass micro-drone swarm. Hundreds of small, commercially derived, GPS-guided unmanned aerial vehicles, each carrying 2 to 4 kilograms of explosive material, launched simultaneously from multiple dispersed positions, approaching a single target from multiple azimuths at low altitude, and designed specifically to saturate and exhaust the point defense systems that protect a destroyer at close range. Tonight, we examine what happens when 500 such drones arrive at a US Navy destroyer in the Red Sea on a moonless October evening, what Phalanx and Ram do against them, and what the mathematics of ammunition consumption look like when the swarm exceeds the magazine capacity of every defensive system on the ship. This is a fictional simulation. Every system described is real. Every tactical element is grounded in documented swarm attack doctrine and the specific technical parameters of the FPV drone as a military weapon system. Let's begin. The Houthi drone program had evolved substantially since 2023. Early Shahed 136 attacks used systems with 3.5-meter wingspans, radar cross-sections of 0.05 square meters, and speeds of 185 kilometers per hour, detectable beyond 30 kilometers, effectively countered by the growing naval defensive architecture. By mid-2025, the inventory had diversified to commercially derived FPV racing drone platforms, fixed-wing and quadcopter systems whose manufacturing base in China and Southeast Asia provided unit costs of $400 to $800 per completed weapon system. The FPV micro-drone presented a categorically different engagement problem. Wingspan, 0.6 to 0.8 meters. Radar cross-section, 0.001 to 0.003 square meters. Speed 140 to 180 kilometers per hour at terminal approach. Detection range against sea surface clutter, 8 to 12 kilometers. Against the Shahed's 30-kilometer detection range, the FPV cut available engagement time by more than half. The Phalanx, CIWS, Block 1B. The destroyer's primary close-in defense system, with its 20mm M61A1 Vulcan cannon, firing at 4,500 rounds per minute, had been progressively upgraded since 2024 with software modifications specifically targeting the FPV micro-drone engagement problem. The upgraded tracking algorithm could detect and engage targets with radar cross-sections down to 0.002 square meters at ranges of approximately 1,800 meters. The Phalanx's magazine held 1,550 rounds, providing approximately 20 seconds of sustained firing. At a standard burst length of 50 to 100 rounds per engagement, The magazine could support 15 to 30 individual engagements before requiring a reload cycle that took a trained crew approximately 45 minutes in field conditions. The RIM-116, rolling airframe missile, the Ram block. Two-launcher mounted on the ship's aft superstructure, carried 21 missiles per launcher in its ready magazine. Each Ram missile was effective against small aerial targets, including FPV drones at ranges of 500 to 9,000 meters. 21 rounds. Against a 500 drone swarm arriving in waves, 21 Ram missiles represented the capacity to engage 21 individual drones before the launcher required a full magazine reload, a process requiring 20 to 30 minutes. The operation was designated Asifa al-Nahl, Swarm Storm. It had been developed over 4 months with direct IRGC technical advisory input and had incorporated lessons from the Ukrainian battlefield employment of FPV swarms against armored vehicles and naval assets in the Black Sea. The core operational concept was layered saturation, not a single simultaneous mass launch, which would allow the defender to concentrate all defensive systems on one threat wave, but a sequenced multi-wave attack from multiple azimuths designed to exhaust each defensive system in turn, before transitioning to the next wave when that system's magazine was depleted. The attack package consisted of 500 FPV fixed-wing microdrones and 80 FPV quadcopter microdrones, 580 total airframes, organized into 7 launch groups positioned across a 140-degree arc of the Yemeni coastal zone. Each drone carried a 3.2 kilogram-shaped charge warhead with an impact fuse. The fixed-wing platforms operated at 140 kilometers per hour at altitudes of 15 to 30 meters above sea level, below the radar horizon at engagement-relevant ranges in the sea clutter environment. The quadcopters operated at 80 to 120 meters altitude, slightly more detectable but capable of terminal dive maneuvers that the fixed-wing platforms could not execute. The launch sequence was designed to produce the following arrival profile at the target. Wave 1, 120 fixed-wing drones from the southwest, arriving simultaneously at 1944. Wave 2, 140 fixed-wing drones from the west and northwest, arriving 4 minutes after Wave 1. Wave 3, 100 fixed-wing drones from the north and northeast, arriving 8 minutes after Wave 1. Wave 4, 140 fixed-wing drones from the southeast, arriving 11 minutes after Wave 1. Wave 5, 80 quadcopter drones from all azimuths simultaneously, arriving 14 minutes after Wave 1. The terminal saturation wave, time to arrive when the analysis predicted that Phalanx and Ram inventories would be critically depleted at 1931, 13 minutes before our timestamp. 580 drones launched from 7 dispersed positions along the Yemeni coastal zone. At 140 kilometers per hour, the fixed-wing platforms would cover the 67 nautical mile distance to the target in approximately 29 minutes. Wave 1, the Southwest Group, had the shortest transit because its launch position was 11 nautical miles closer to the target track than the other groups. The timing offsets between waves had been calculated to produce the 4-minute, 4-minute, 3-minute, and 3-minute intervals between wave arrivals despite the varying distances. The destroyer's SPY-6 radar detected the first wave at 1942:11, 1 minute and 49 seconds before their projected arrival. As 120 fixed-wing drones emerged from the coastal clutter at a range of 7.4 nautical miles, bearing 210 degrees, altitude 20 to 28 meters, speed 140 kilometers per hour, 120 targets, simultaneously, on a single bearing. The tactical action officer had the track data at 1942:14 and called the picture in 3 seconds. This is a swarm attack. 120 plus contacts bearing 210, range 7 miles, altitude low. All defensive systems, weapons free. Phalanx to auto. Ram engage priority targets, EW full spectrum. The AN/SLQ-32 electronic warfare system immediately broadcast across all FPV drone command frequencies. A GPS jamming and radio control disruption package that had been specifically developed for the FPV drone threat. Against GPS-guided systems, The jamming was effective against FPV drones operating on encrypted frequency-hopping radio control signals. The jamming achieved partial disruption. The EW assessment conducted at 1942-18 indicated that approximately 30 to 40% of the inbound contacts were showing erratic flight behavior consistent with partial guidance disruption. 60 to 70% were continuing on unaffected approach profiles. 72 to 84 drones in Wave 1 were unaffected by the EW package. The RAM launcher began firing at 1942-19, engaging the highest priority contacts at the leading edge of the wave. Each RAM missile fired, tracked, and engaged at a rate of approximately 1 engagement every 4 seconds at close range. In 1942-19 to 1943-07, 48 seconds, the RAM launcher expended all 21 rounds. 21 drones neutralized. The launcher was empty. The Phalanx CIWS acquired contacts at 1942-31, 12 seconds after the RAM began firing, as the wave closed to within 1,800 meters. The Phalanx fired in rapid burst sequences. 80 rounds on first contact, sweeping left across the approaching formation, achieving 4 confirmed neutralizations in the first burst. Second burst, 100 rounds, 6 neutralizations. The Phalanx was firing at its maximum effective rate against a distributed target set. The system's single barrel tracked and engaged individual contacts sequentially, not simultaneously. And the 140 km/h closure rate of the approaching drones meant that each engagement window lasted approximately 4 to 6 seconds before the drone either was neutralized or passed through the engagement zone. By 1943-18, 47 seconds after first Phalanx engagement, the system had expended 680 rounds and achieved 34 neutralizations. 846 rounds remained in the magazine. The EW package had disrupted 38 of 120 Wave 1 drones. RAM had neutralized 21. Phalanx had neutralized 34. Combined, 93 neutralizations from 120 inbound drones. 27 drones had penetrated the engagement zone. Of the 27 penetrators, 19 impacted the water within close range. EW degradation, producing aim point errors of 8 to 40 meters. 8 reached the ship's hull or superstructure. 6 impacted the port hull above the waterline. The shaped charge warheads penetrated the 6mm outer hull, plating into interior spaces. Laundry facility, berthing compartment, equipment storage areas. No fuel, propulsion, or combat system penetrations. The shaped jets exhausted their energy in the second structural layer. 2 drones impacted the port bridge wing, both detonating on contact, destroying the forward equipment rack and producing fragmentation that penetrated the bridge windows. 3 bridge watch personnel sustained fragmentation injuries, 2 minor, 1 requiring sutures. The ship was damaged. It was not disabled. Its propulsion, combat system, radar, and weapon systems were all operational. Wave 2 arrived at 1947-22. 140 fixed-wing drones from the west and northwest. The Phalanx had 870 rounds remaining. 1 minute and 10 seconds of sustained firing capacity. The RAM launcher was empty. The EW system continued operating. The EW package disrupted approximately 52 of 140 Wave 2 drones, a higher disruption rate than Wave 1 because the northwest bearing brought the drones into the EW system's maximum power coverage sector. 88 drones continued unaffected. The Phalanx engaged from 1947-34. Firing rate, 120 rounds per burst, 7 confirmed neutralizations per burst. In 1947-34 to 1948-09, 35 seconds, 700 rounds expended. The Phalanx achieved 41 neutralizations. Magazine, 170 rounds remaining. The system fired its final burst at 1948-11. 170 rounds, 9 neutralizations. Magazine empty at 1948 and 14 seconds. Total wave, 2 neutralizations, 52 EW disruptions plus 50 Phalanx kills. 102 of 140. 38 drones penetrated the engagement zone. The ram launcher was empty and could not supplement. The ship's crew had initiated emergency ram reload at 19:43:09, immediately after the launcher went dry, deploying the aft deck team in full flash gear to execute the reload procedure. At 19:48:14, with 9 minutes and 5 seconds elapsed since the ram went empty, the reload was 60% complete. 12 new rounds were seated in the launcher. The remaining 9 would require another 4 minutes and 20 seconds. Of Wave 2's 38 penetrators, 22 impacted water in the ship's immediate vicinity with miss distances of 3 to 29 meters. The miss distances were smaller than Wave 1. The EW disruption rate was lower in the final 2 miles of approach. 16 impacted the ship. 11 impacts were on the hull. 7 above the waterline. 4 at or below the waterline on the port side. The 4 below waterline impacts were the critical events. 3 penetrations remained within the outer void spaces. 1 penetrated into the auxiliary machinery space, flooding at approximately 340 liters per minute. Damage control teams isolated the source at 19:51:44, 3 minutes and 22 seconds after impact, sealing the watertight door and activating the portable submersible pump. 5 additional impacts on the superstructure. 3 on the port deck equipment area. 1 on the communications antenna mast, destroying 2 of 4 antennas. 1 on the forward EO/IR sensor turret. The forward EO/IR sensor was destroyed. External communications capability reduced, but not eliminated. Wave 3 arrived at 19:52:14. 100 fixed-wing drones from the north and northeast. Phalanx was empty, reloading. RAM had 12 rounds seated with 9 in process. EW remained active. RAM fired its 12 available rounds at 19:52:19. 12 neutralizations in 48 seconds. EW disrupted 31 of 100. The magazine team completed a partial Phalanx reload at 19:53:07. 24 minutes under combat conditions. An exceptional result against the standard 45-minute procedure. Phalanx re-engaged at 19:53:09 with 1,550 fresh rounds, achieving 14 additional neutralizations against Wave 3's trailing elements. Total Wave 3 neutralizations: 57 of 100. 43 penetrated. 21 hull and superstructure impacts. Cumulative: 42 impacts across 3 waves, none into propulsion or combat systems, but below waterline accumulation was beginning to stress hull watertight integrity. The commanding officer made his tactical decision at 19:53:22. Between Wave 3 and Wave 4's projected arrival in 2 minutes and 44 seconds. He ordered a course change to east, increasing speed to 28 knots. The course change was not evasion. At 140 kilometers per hour, the drones had more than enough speed to pursue at 28 knots. The course change was geometry. By turning east toward the Yemeni coast's lateral bearing, he was placing the ship's bow, the narrowest radar and physical cross-section, toward the projected arrival bearing of Wave 4 from the southeast. A bow-on aspect reduced the number of hull surfaces presenting to the attacking drones and forced the fixed-wing platforms, whose terminal guidance was optimized for a broad beam target aspect, to reacquire on the modified geometry. Wave 4 arrived at 19:56:04. 140 drones from the southeast. The Phalanx had 1,150 rounds remaining. The RAM had completed its full 21-round reload at 19:55:44. 20 seconds before Wave 4's arrival, RAM and Phalanx engaged simultaneously beginning at 19:56:09. RAM: 21 rounds, 21 neutralizations. Phalanx: 900 rounds expended in 2 minutes and 6 seconds. 52 neutralizations. EW disrupted 48 of 140. Total neutralizations: 121 of 140. 19 drones penetrated. 8 hull impacts, 11 water misses at 2 to 18 meters. The hull impacts continued their pattern. No propulsion, no combat system penetrations. But the forward hull section's accumulating damage now included 2 below-waterline penetrations that were producing manageable but continuous flooding that the damage control teams were containing with pumps and temporary patching material. Wave 5 arrived at 19:59 and 12 seconds. 80 quadcopter drones from all azimuths simultaneously. The quadcopters were operating at 80 to 120 meters altitude, higher than the fixed-wing waves, presenting a cleaner radar return, engaging across a 360-degree defensive perimeter simultaneously. The Phalanx had 250 rounds remaining. The Ram had 0 rounds. The second reload was in progress, estimated 8 minutes to completion. EW was active across all quadcopter control frequencies. 250 rounds of Phalanx ammunition against 80 quadcopter drones approaching from all directions. The Phalanx could engage in one direction at a time. It tracked, fired, cycling across the highest priority contacts as fast as its servo tracking system allowed. In 2 minutes and 12 seconds, it expended all 250 remaining rounds and achieved 19 neutralizations. EW disrupted 22 of 80. Total Wave 5 neutralizations, 41 of 80. 39 quadcopters penetrated. Of those 39, 14 achieved hull or superstructure impacts. 12 were water misses at very close range. The 360-degree approach geometry had saturated the ship's ability to generate miss-inducing electronic disruption in all sectors simultaneously. 13 additional impacts. The ship had now absorbed 55 total impacts across 5 waves, 23 below waterline or waterline impacts, 32 above waterline hits, no propulsion damage, no Aegis system damage, no VLS damage. The ship was structurally stressed and partially flooded in 3 contained sections, but it was making 28 knots on its modified heading, and its combat system was fully operational. The attack ended at 20:01:44, 17 minutes and 30 seconds after Wave 1's arrival. Of 580 total drones launched, the EW system had disrupted approximately 181. The Ram had fired 33 rounds, achieving 33 neutralizations, and the Phalanx had achieved approximately 164 neutralizations across its 2 ammunition loads. Total defensive neutralizations: approximately 378 of 580 drones, a 65% overall neutralization rate. 202 drones had penetrated to terminal range. Of those, 55 had achieved impacts on the ship. The ship's casualties: 11 personnel injured across all 5 waves, 7 from fragmentation effects, 3 from concussive blast exposure, 1 from a secondary fire in a damaged equipment locker that was extinguished within 4 minutes. No fatalities. The damage assessment completed at 2100 identified the ship as combat capable, but requiring immediate port call for structural inspection and repair of the below waterline hull damage. The commanding officer made for Djibouti at 22 knots, escorted by a second destroyer that had been dispatched from the task force at 1955 when the swarm attack scale became clear. The 3 tankers in the convoy, the ships the destroyer had been escorting, had maneuvered to maximum separation from the attack at the commanding officer's order at 1942-18, immediately after the Wave 1 detection. None were attacked. The swarm had been targeted specifically on the destroyer, the military asset, not the commercial vessels it was protecting. The counterstrike authorization reached CENTCOM at 2011, 26 minutes after Wave 1's arrival. The Houthi drone launch positions: 7 sites along the Yemeni coast, identified by the SBIRS detection of the launch signatures and confirmed by a Global Hawk repositioned at 1934, when early signals intelligence had suggested elevated Houthi drone activity in the Al-Muqa coastal zone, were struck by 8 AGM-158 BJASSMER cruise missiles launched from a B-1B Lancer at Al Udeid Air Base. 6 of 7 sites were struck. 1 site had been vacated after launch. The mobile launch equipment had been recovered and displaced before the JASSMER arrived. 5 confirmed drone launch facility destructions. 1 miss. The after-action review produced 4 findings driving immediate fleet-wide changes. The first was the magazine depth gap. Combined RAM and Phalanx inventory was insufficient against a 5-wave attack. The Phalanx was reloaded once under combat conditions. Exceptional crew performance. And was still empty when Wave 5 arrived. A second Phalanx mount and a rapid reload RAM system, reducing the replenishment cycle from 20 minutes to under 8, were directed for evaluation. The second was the EW disruption rate gap. The AN/SLQ-32 achieved 31 to 44% disruption. Effective against GPS-guided platforms. Less effective against the frequency-hopping encrypted control systems, used by approximately 60% of the inbound drones. A next-generation EW package targeting frequency-hopping FPV protocols was directed for emergency development. The third was the directed energy gap. The Lias shipborne laser, capable of engaging FPV-class targets at 1 to 3 kilometers with unlimited magazine depth, was installed on 2 Atlantic Fleet destroyers in an evaluation program, but had not been deployed to the Red Sea. Emergency deployment of 1 LAWS-equipped destroyer was directed within 21 days. The fourth was the formation geometry gap. A single destroyer as the sole point defense asset for a 3-tanker convoy concentrated all swarm defense on 1 ship's finite magazine. Revised doctrine requiring a minimum of 2 surface combatants per convoy, allowing one to reload while the other maintains engagement, was directed within 14 days. This is the arithmetic of sufficiency that Navy Legends has been tracing through every engagement in this series. The Phalanx works. The RAM works. The EIW works. Each system performs within its parameters. The problem is the finite magazine capacity of all 3 combined, measured against an adversary whose cost per drone is $400 to $800, and whose Chinese-supplied component base can replace a 580 drone swarm for $280,000 to $460,000. The 2 Phalanx loads consumed, 3,100 rounds at $20 each, cost $62,000. The 33 RAM missiles cost $3.3 million. Ship repair, $14 million. Total defensive expenditure, $17.4 million. Total adversary attack cost, $350,000. 49 to 1 in the attacker's favor. The swarm does not need to sink the ship. It needs only to be cheaper to launch than the defense is to sustain, and to scale faster than the magazine replenishment rate. On October 29th, 580 drones and $350,000 produced 55 hull impacts, 11 injured personnel, and a $14 million repair bill. The next swarm will have learned from every missed distance the previous swarm produced. Stay informed. Stay vigilant. I'll see you in the next one.